Hey, this is Hunter with Lone Star Woodworking, and this is my very first epoxy table. And in this video, I'm going to do an updated version of it for one of my best and oldest clients. Alright, y'all, so like I said, that was my very first epoxy table, and I didn't know a thing about a thing whenever I built that table. I had used this mesquite burl that I bought off of some shady dude on Facebook Marketplace, and it was still wet. Even though he advertised it as dry and treated for bugs, it was still wet. It was at like 38% moisture. It was absolutely ridiculous. But I didn't know any better, and it actually had bugs, which those came out whenever I poured the epoxy. And when this client first reached out to me, he said, "Hey, I want this bright purple look to it." And I said, "All right, yeah, sure." And I didn't know the difference between marine epoxy and deep pour epoxy or any of the epoxies, really. I didn't have any of the knowledge that I have now. So at the time, I used this marine epoxy, which was a 1-to-1, and it reacted kind of severely in the sunlight. And if you didn't know, if you tint epoxy purple, it tends to turn blue instead of the yellow that you would normally get with clear epoxy. And again, kind of a weird thing, if you tint it blue, over time it becomes more clear. So that's why the table didn't have that vibrant purple that the customer originally had. It was just this kind of dulled out purple bluish color. And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, my son tried to move the table, and one of the screws that you had used," yes, I was using screws back then, not threaded inserts, came out, and it just like stripped out the hole. "So can you reattach the legs?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely, bring it by." Well, he brought it by, and once I saw the state of that table, which was all kinds of discolored, in fact, some parts of the table were completely different colors, I said, "Oh my gosh, hey man, I'd be happy to redo and update this table for you if you're up for it." And he said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely, I'm down for that." And I said, "All right, man, let me look around the shop, see what I got." And I had these red oak burl cookies that had been sitting in my shop for I don't even know how long. You know that these shots were taken quite a while ago because I still have my router sled and I look like I weigh a little bit less. And there was just a whole lot of me kind of messing with these cookies and then putting them away for a while, messing with them for a little bit, like cleaning them up and then putting them away for a while. So this is me digging them out after not messing with them for a while, just to see what else I could use them for. And I think that I was actually just taking pictures of them so that I could try to pitch them to a client. And again, this was a long time before this customer came over and wanted me to redo this table for them, and I offered to do that. So this is me initially trying to figure out what to do with it. And I initially had this idea of a really big round table because I haven't done one since the redwood table, and I've been kind of jonesing for a round table build. But you know what? It just wasn't in the cards, because even though I went through the process of cutting these pieces into a circle for a mold that was circular, it just didn't pan out for me because the epoxy alone was going to cost probably close to $600. And at this time, I just simply didn't have that to spend on a fun project. So I cut this circle, and then you'll see here that I'm even going to go through the whole process of trimming it off with my jigsaw and then cleaning up the edge with my router, all for it to just sit on the shelf for another, I think close to 8 months. It was kind of ridiculous, and this stuff is super pretty. If you ever get the chance to work with red oak burl, it's really, really pretty stuff. It's got these purple streaks in it, these black streaks, these kind of orangish streaks. It looks really, really pretty. And I was getting kind of upset with the fact that they were just sitting there, not being used in something that would inevitably be this gorgeous piece of furniture. So whenever this client came along and kind of gave me the opportunity, I jumped at it. And this was my last effort at trying to find something to do with these slabs before this client came along. It went from circle table, like big circle table, to, okay, hey, I wonder if I can just make a desk. I was just trying my damnedest to lower the cost of the amount of epoxy I was going to need any way that I could. So I started cutting them down to fit inside of a now square mold for a desk, and that's where they sat for another good long while before I had the opportunity to come back and actually do anything with them. And now we're in the semi-present day. This was like 2 months ago. And I've got a coffee table form that I'm setting everything on top of, just trying to figure out a layout, communicating back and forth with this client and seeing what he likes. I'm still going to use this super bright, vibrant purple, but I'm not going to use some weird no-name brand from Amazon. I'm going to use the black diamond pigment. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's super pretty, and you'll see it here in just a second. Going with my normal method of using tape in order to have that form release so that way nothing gets stuck to it. Probably wouldn't have been a super big deal if I did just do that, like directly to the MDF, because it's really easy to plane off. And then we really wanted as organic of a shape as we could possibly manage, and this is what we landed on, and I thought this looked really slick. Out of all of the layouts that I've done for live edge slabs, I really do think that this one is my favorite. And this is the purple pigment we're going to be using. As most of you know, I don't necessarily like to do colored pigment pours because they're very difficult to fix, and it gets hot here in Texas. So if it cracks, I cannot mimic the pattern that naturally forms with the exothermic reaction easily. Whereas if I just use jet black, it is super easy to spot fix. You know, you can just fill black with black, you can color match it pretty freaking close, and your client's gonna be none the wiser. But with something like this, it's pretty obvious whenever some kind of catastrophic issue like that occurs. Luckily, again, I've got a little bit more experience leading up to this point, so I just did a couple of shallow pours and got everything to the level that it needed to be. After about 2 weeks, it was time to bust everything out of the form, and you see how easy everything is coming off. If I had to do this, I would have done this with melamine and paste wax because it's just easier to do it that way, but my Home Depot, weirdly enough, stopped selling melamine. I don't know what happened. So y'all heard me mention, I think 2 videos ago, something like that there was going to be a guy opening up that had this Slab Miser-esque machine that was going to leave a nicer planed finish than the Lucas mill that Corey over at Algoa Millworks uses. And this is the result of it. It is so freaking nice. I don't have to sit here and fill in chipped out epoxy or anything. It was just as simple as moving right into getting everything down to its final dimensions, which is 24 by 48. That's just a very standard coffee table size. There was no particular reason for me picking that size. It's just what fit the best for this situation. Now, of course, with this being a bunch of cookies and a burl, there's going to be a metric ton of these stupid little holes and cracks and dings and checks and imperfections that I have to fill with CA glue. And that was actually the top. I was just trying to make my life a little bit easier whenever I was done sanding the bottom, which is what I'm doing here, so that whenever I flipped it over, all I had to do was sand it off. Wishful thinking, we all know. And then I'm putting a 22-degree chamfer on the bottom. I don't really know how I feel about this at this point. If you watched my last video, you saw that I was sanding the sides, basically filing it down with a really high grit of sandpaper. And I liked that look a whole lot more. I liked that more squared off look. This does add a more modern look to it, but I don't know. I've just kind of fallen out of love with the whole 22-degree chamfer. Once that chamfer was put on, I sand the bottom up to just 120. I'm not trying to go super crazy here. Not trying to waste a whole lot of time on the bottom. And like I said, this client, he's one of my oldest and best. He's not super picky about how this looks or feels on the bottom, but I wanted to make sure that top was going to look as good as I could possibly get it for him, which is why you see me sitting here filling in a couple hundred little CA glue touch-ups. And then with that activator, it cures in about 5 seconds. So just move into sanding it all off and just rinse and repeat that process about 60 more times. And then that's about how much time I had to spend with this. From there, it was moving up the sanding grits all the way up to 400. I wanted this to feel like glass, like butter. And also because these were cookies, it was going to absorb a ton of the finish, which was just going to be more of a headache than it was worth in the end. So I wanted to sand it up pretty high and see if I could maybe save a little bit of the finish. And then using this technique to just kind of break the corners, I just find it to be a little bit more consistent than with a roundover bit. I don't know what it is about me using a roundover bit that makes the corners or the edges look so inconsistent, but this just works best for me. And now moving on to the very first coat of finish on this table. And this burl looks so freaking pretty. The purples and everything in the burl itself, and then the color of the epoxy, and just how well the, I guess, pattern or the swirling came out in the epoxy. It looks really freaking cool. And again, I'm not one to really like these colored pours too much, but this one looks freaking nice. And I'm not going to go crazy with the legs either. This was a $80 pair of really good, like 1-inch steel tubing legs. Just attach them with threaded inserts in order to avoid the same problem that this client and his son had initially, where he knocked it over and ripped a screw out. So these threaded inserts will prevent that from happening, and it's just a lot more solid. It also has these leveling feet so that if it does get into the house and the floor is a little bit unlevel, or if for some odd reason the table isn't square and flush and flat, then they can adjust it that way. Now, what was weird is the next day, whenever I came out and started doing this second coat, the only reason I'm doing a second coat is because the heat from my garage being closed actually pushed some of the finish back out of some of the holes. So I had to sand it down with 600 grit and then reapply a second coat. And guys, this is the final product. Please excuse my very shaky camera work here. I hope that the next pictures are a little bit easier for you to follow along with, but guys, this thing looks freaking sick. I love the organic flow of the epoxy. I love how these cookies work together. I love the color of the wood. And I think that this is a really good update to that very first epoxy table. Y'all let me know what you think about this in the comments. Let me know if you think I should do more colored pours, less colored pours, no colored pours at all. I'm genuinely curious to hear your opinions on that and these legs. So guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you next time. See ya.